You're listening to Cross Rhythms Plymouth 96.3 FM, and I've got the privilege and pleasure of being joined in the studio by Mr. Paul Friend. Hi, Paul.
Hello.
It's great to have you here. This has been a little bit long time in the organising in some ways, but it's great to have you here. And your role is with Swym. You're the director of Swym. You're involved in lots of other things in church life, ministry life, and things like that. You're here to talk about a book that you've written as well. But for those who aren't aware of you, never met you, can you introduce yourself to us and to the listeners?
Yeah, so I'm Paul Friend. I'm married to Jo, got a couple of teenage boys, which keeps me out of mischief.
Yeah, or in mischief.
And yeah, for my kind of ministry work role, I head up this charity called Swym, which is Southwest Youth Ministries. Our vision is that every child and young person across the whole of the Southwest would encounter Jesus, come to know him and make a choice to live for more. And so we're all about training and equipping children and youth leaders who are volunteers right through to employed, and run courses up to degree level, as well as loads of camps and events, even in the city and beyond as well.
Yeah. So your work definitely massively involved here in Plymouth, has been for some time, through people being involved, swim workers being involved in different churches, church plants. Us here at Crosslands, we've got one as well at the minute, which is great. But so Swym, is that something you've been doing for a long time?
So Swym was born in 1997. I got involved in 99. Wow. As a fresh-faced 19-year-old, long time ago, and was a youth worker in Mid-Devon for a few years, and then was invited to join the team. Yeah. And I've been heading up the team since the beginning of 2005. Amazing. So, yeah, heading towards 20 years now.
Wow, that's awesome. So a massive thing you're hugely passionate about, devoted a long time to. So let's talk about your book then. You've written a book. Have you written books before this?
This is I've written articles and stuff like that, but this is the first time kind of trying to write a full book. So it was daunting for sure.
Yeah. So how did you find the writing process then?
I wouldn't say it's something that I was excited or it was. I was scared of writing. Mainly, I've done a master's before, so I've had to write like a dissertation and stuff like that. Yeah. But it's not something I find easy. Sure. I'm more of a verbal communicator, so to actually sit down and write, it takes a lot for me. Yeah. But I guess it was a God thing in terms of having quite a number of people kind of speaking to my life and say, "Oh, we feel like that you need to write something," and then just praying about it. And then I had a sabbatical for 12 weeks at the beginning of 2023, and so that gave me a chunk of time just to devote to kind of spending time with God and focusing in on writing the book. So
love that. So you said people came to you, said you should write a book. Were they saying to you should write this book specifically, or just write in general, and then this book came out of it?
So after? More the latter. So people who felt that I should that I needed to write something. And then I spent a bit of time just praying and thinking about, well, if I was going to, what would it be? And just naturally thought it would probably be about youth work. Explored some conversations about that. Mm-hmm. But then just, I guess, in lots of ways, the book is a bit of Swym's story in terms of our values and heartbeat. And I guess more wanting to write about a topic that I'm really personally passionate about, but recognise I need to grow in so much. So then I got excited about studying and exploring the topic.
Love that. Yeah. Well, we've kind of kept it hidden until now, but it's called Fierce Humility. So obviously the subject is about humility. And so, I mean, you've touched on it there a little bit, but why that? Why did that jump out to you as being the thing to write about?
Well, I think firstly, it's a ridiculous idea to write a book on humility, and obviously there's lots of gags.
And then get into lots of radio interviews saying,
I know, and it's probably the most awkward thing I've ever done. And then trying to sell a book on humility, that's even worse. Yeah. But I guess it's interestingly, as I began to explore and research, there's not a lot of books solely on humility, probably for that awkward reason.
Yeah, okay.
There's a lot of discipleship books that might have a chapter on humility, but not a whole book. And I guess for me, I've written it not because I think I'm humble, like that would be ridiculous. There's a quote at the end of the book.
Definition of irony.
Yeah. Well, R.T. Kendall said, As soon as you think you're humble, you've just lost it.
Yeah.
And so that's not the message of the book. The message of the book is really, I recognise how pride is so easily at work in my life, in my attitudes, my thoughts, my motivations, everything. And I desperately want to root that out to walk in the way of Jesus, which I think, he describes himself as gentle and humble in heart. So it's who he is. And so if we want to be more like Jesus, then we have to pursue humility in the way that I think, and I use the term fierce humility, which some people say that's a bit odd. That feels like their juxtaposition in terms of the words, but it's deliberate because I think what we see in Jesus, often art doesn't help us in that when we see pictures of Jesus, it's often like this meek and mild, soft, gentle. And not saying that Jesus wasn't gentle.
Sure.
But I think we see throughout the Gospels him really fight against pride, both in Pharisees, statements like whitewashed tombs and brood of vipers aren't kind of meek and mild.
Yeah.
But also in his disciples, it's like he knew it was a core issue, the issue of pride, and so he attacks it head on. And I kind of, the process of writing was really a process of doing heart surgery on myself to recognise and become even more aware of how I need to root pride out with the Holy Spirit's help.
Love that. Great. We're going to stop for some music and talk more with Paul right after this. You're listening to Cross Rhythms Plymouth 96.3 FM, and I'm in conversation with Paul Friend, who is an author, first-time author of a book called Fierce Humility. And it's a book that, I loved what you said there, that you're writing it more talking about, I suppose, the value of the principles of humility rather than it being something that you're really well versed in. In fact, maybe the opposite. You're kind of aware of your lack thereof. So was it something, whilst you felt like you needed to grow in it, was it something you felt you knew a lot about? Was it something you had to do a lot of background research in, or kind of talk to me about those?
Yeah, so I think the topic itself is something that we talk a lot about in Swym. One of our values is being a servant-hearted community, and what it means to kind of lower ourselves and prefer others, and particularly in ministry, making sure that we're not competing, but we're preferring the church down the road over ours, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess we talk about it a lot. We try and model it in the way that we interact as a team. But I was excited to do some more research and to chew into it some more. And so I guess the journey of the book is really looking at it's two parts. So the first part is focused in on how do we humble ourselves before God, and what does it look like to walk humbly with our God, as Micah talks about. But then secondly, how do we walk humbly before others? And some people find one of those more difficult than the other, but what does it mean? Sometimes it can be more, it's easier to humble ourselves before God because he's God. But humbling ourselves before someone who's hurt us, or someone that we think's a bit of an idiot, that can be more challenging. So it tries to tackle both of those things, recognizing that we have to do both.
Do you, your role at Swym, your title is Director of Swym. Do you feel like that puts you in a position where there's even more temptation to step into pride, to step into the opposition of humility, because by its very nature, you're potentially at the top of a hierarchical pyramid? Now, obviously, that's not the way you like to work at Swym, but does that give you a kind of an angle to it that maybe is slightly unique?
Yeah, I guess so. And it is, it's focused around leadership as a book because, and actually at the end of each chapter, there's questions to explore, either personal reflection or to do in a group, specifically looking at leadership culture within our context, which might be leading your family, it might be leading a home group, it might be leading the sound and visual teams at church. It could be any position where you've got influence over others. And I guess whenever we have influence over others and we're in a position of leadership, we can start to think that we're it, which of course none of us are. And so I guess, some of the motivation around the book was just a frustration of looking in in the West at how leadership is done, and this kind of pursuit of celebrity and stage.
Yeah.
And sadly, in the church as well. And we're all sick of stories of abuse of power and manipulation and control and all sorts. And I'm just like, I just think we've moved, even as the church, so far away from Jesus' model of leadership, which was not about the stage, which was actually more about village and releasing his disciples to be in the forefront rather than him. He quite often told people to not talk about what he'd done.
Yeah.
So I think the premise of the book is how do we get back to Jesus, to the lifestyle and heart of Jesus, but also the leadership of Jesus.
And I suppose restoring that aspect that's truly countercultural, isn't it? As you say,
Absolutely.
Our natural human instinct is to kind of big ourselves up at the expense of others. And Jesus, the exact opposite. That's kind of the definition of humility, isn't it? Really, in that sense.
But interestingly, even with that, I talk in the book a little bit about something called worm pride, which is almost like the opposite of thinking we're it and we're amazing, which is where actually we think we're rubbish, we're no good, God could never use us. We are, where we end up doing ourselves down. But I would still argue that's still pride because it's about us.
Yeah.
Rather than, so it's trying to find that balanced view of where we see ourselves as God sees us.
Yeah.
But we still place ourselves totally dependent upon him.
Yeah, love that. So you've touched on it a little bit, but before we get into where people can get a copy, like who would you say primarily this book's for? Who do you think is going to get the most out of it? I mean, I guess it's like any book, anyone can read it, but who have you kind of aimed it to primarily?
I guess I've particularly aimed it at anyone who has some kind of leadership role. But again, I would say that within the broadest terms, whether that's you run a business, whether that's you're a church leader, whether that's you're on the youth team at church, on the visuals team, on the welcome team, anywhere.
Or a parent.
Absolutely. Any position where you have got influence. I think there's enough in there just exploring humility for anybody, but it definitely has a steer at the end of each chapter around what does it mean to earth this in your leadership context, with some helpful tips, but also some questions. And so what's been really nice since the book's been out, I've had quite a few people come back to me and say, we're actually going to do this as a leadership team now, or we're going to do it as a house group now.
Nice.
to think over it together, because it's not a workbook, but at the end of each chapter it's got those questions, so it can kind of be like one.
Yeah, and I suppose final question before we talk about where you can get it. I imagine it's one of those that's best worked out sort of in community, because
Definitely.
you'll have other people who'll be able to pick up on the areas where you're maybe not so humble.
Yeah.
So working it together is probably a good thing.
Absolutely, and it's part of, I talk quite a lot about, what does it look like to humble ourselves before others, and talk about forgiveness and accountability and vulnerability. And so to sometimes say, actually, this is an area I really struggle with, and to be able to sharpen each other, because we're never made to do this relationship with God on our own.
No.
And so hopefully sharpening each other, and choosing to make ourselves vulnerable before one another is actually part of the key to walking in this way.
Nice, love that. All right, so putting you on the spot then, and kind of vitally, where can people get a copy? Where's the best place to pick up a copy?
So you can get it through our website, which is www.swym, which is swym.org.uk. There's a link on the homepage straight to get it from there. That's the best way to do it. We actually have got a bundle deal if you do want to do it as a leadership team or as a home group or something, where you can get 5 for the price of 4.
Awesome.
Or if you want to, you can get it off Amazon as well. Just look for Fierce Humility on there, and it will come straight up, and you can order it direct from there to anywhere in the world.
Perfect. Paul, thank you so much for your time, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.